Humanity had always looked to the stars, but the discovery of the mysterious signal was something entirely different. It began as an anomaly, barely noticeable, a faint pulse of electromagnetic energy, hidden within the background noise of deep space. At first, it was dismissed as a random fluke, just another of the countless irregularities in the vast expanse. But then the pulse repeated, over and over again, at precise intervals. No natural phenomenon behaved this way, and, as the signal persisted, a pattern began to emerge. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a renowned astrophysicist and expert in deep space communications, was the first to recognize the significance. She had spent years studying radio waves from distant galaxies, but this was unlike anything she had ever encountered. The signal wasn't just a random burst of radiation. It was structured, deliberate, even intelligent. The frequency was unlike any human-made transmission, yet unmistakably artificial. She immediately contacted her colleagues at the Galactic Research Institute, who quickly confirmed her findings. The world watched as the story unfolded. News of the signal spread across the globe, sparking excitement, skepticism, and fear. Some dismissed it as a hoax, or the result of a cosmic phenomenon that was misinterpreted. But Dr. Vasquez's team was adamant. This was no accident. It was a message, and it was meant for humanity. The breakthrough came when Dr. Vasquez and her colleagues deciphered part of the signal. The transmission was a map that led to a forgotten corner of the galaxy, far from any known colonies or research stations. The coordinates pointed to a planet, one that had long been believed to be a barren, lifeless rock. The map, however, suggested otherwise. It revealed the exact location of a hidden world, one that had been untouched by civilization for millennia. The implications were staggering. If the map was accurate, humanity was on the verge of rediscovering something far more significant than any of the spacefaring civilizations that had risen and fallen in the galaxy's history. The planet could be the lost home of an ancient race, or even a long-forgotten chapter of humanity's own past. If the signal was a message left by an ancient species, one that had vanished long before humanity ever reached the stars, then what might it reveal about humanity's true origins? As news of the discovery spread, the world was divided. Governments and military organizations were eager to capitalize on the potential power that lay hidden in the message. Corporations saw untold wealth, while religious leaders warned of the consequences of tampering with forces beyond human understanding. But amidst the debates and chaos, a single question loomed: who had sent the signal, and why? The decision was made to mount an expedition, but only the best and the bravest would be selected. A diverse crew was assembled: scientists, historians, explorers, and military personnel, all united by a common purpose. They would travel to the far reaches of space, following the coordinates in search of answers. But as the countdown to departure began, an unsettling thought crept into Dr. Vasquez's mind. If humanity's true origins lay on that distant world, what else might be waiting there, hidden for centuries, waiting to be found? And who, or what, had sent the signal? The journey ahead promised more than just answers. It promised to reshape everything humanity thought it knew about itself. But at what cost? The Endurance cut through the black expanse of space, its engines humming with a steady rhythm that echoed in the crew's minds. The journey to the unknown world was long, longer than any of them had imagined. It would take months to reach the coordinates, and every day felt like an eternity. Yet, the crew was driven by the promise of discovery, each member motivated by their own personal reasons for being part of this unprecedented mission. Some sought glory, others knowledge, but for Dr. Elena Vasquez, it was something more, something deep within her, a feeling that the signal was not just a message, but a warning. The Endurance was a marvel of engineering, a massive exploration vessel designed to withstand the harshest environments. Its crew quarters were comfortable enough, though the confinement of the ship made it easy to grow restless. Days turned into weeks, and the tension among the crew began to grow. Conversations were sparse, replaced by an eerie silence as the crew carried out their duties with a quiet, almost obsessive focus. Yet, despite their best efforts to stay on task, something was wrong. It started with the ship's systems. At first, it was small things, a flickering light here, a system malfunction there. But then, the anomalies became more pronounced. The communications array went down unexpectedly, only to come back online moments later, with no explanation. The navigation system would occasionally display incorrect star maps, showing constellations that weren't supposed to exist in the quadrant they were traveling through. The captain, Jonah Holt, was the first to dismiss it as equipment malfunction, but Dr. Vasquez wasn't so sure. The problems seemed to follow a pattern, one that was disturbingly deliberate. The crew began to experience strange phenomena too. At night, some of them swore they heard voices through the walls, murmurs that seemed to be coming from deep within the ship. Others claimed they'd seen figures in the shadows, fleeting glimpses of someone, or something, watching them from the corners of their vision. Even more unsettling were the dreams. Crew members woke up in cold sweats, unable to remember what they had dreamed, but knowing that whatever it was had been far too real. Captain Holt chalked it up to stress and isolation. It had been months since they'd left the familiar boundaries of known space, and the crew was starting to crack under the pressure. But Dr. Vasquez couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread that gnawed at her. There was something out there, something waiting for them. And whatever it wasn't content to remain hidden. The atmosphere in the ship grew tense as the days passed. As they neared the coordinates of the signal, the unexplained phenomena intensified. Strange energy fluctuations began to ripple through the ship's hull, knocking out the power at random intervals. The navigation system began to behave erratically, showing stars that shouldn't be there, entire constellations that shifted in real time. Then, one evening, the ship's sensors picked up an anomaly, a faint signal, similar to the one they had followed, but coming from a nearby sector of space. It was too weak to trace with any certainty, but it was enough to send a shiver down the spine of the crew. This was no random signal. It was deliberate, as though someone, or something, was tracking them, guiding them toward their final destination. The feeling of being watched intensified, and Dr. Vasquez could no longer shake the thought that they were being led into a trap. Despite the mounting unease, they had no choice but to continue their mission. The Endurance surged forward into the darkness of space, and as the unknown world loomed ever closer, the crew braced for what awaited them on its surface. Whatever it was, they would soon find out. But Dr. Vasquez couldn't escape the chilling thought that the signal was more than just a call to humanity. It was a message, a warning from the past, and they were about to walk right into its heart. The planet was everything they had hoped for, and yet, nothing like they had expected. As the Endurance entered orbit, the crew gazed down upon the world below. It was a lush, green planet, covered in thick jungles and dense forests, with vast mountain ranges and deep, winding rivers cutting through its surface. From space, it looked like any other habitable world, but as the ship descended, the true mystery of the planet became apparent. Scattered across the landscape were the ruins of an ancient city, partially reclaimed by the jungle. Towering structures of stone and metal, twisted and cracked by time, loomed out of the forest canopy. Some were partially buried, while others stood tall and proud, as though daring time to erase them. The city had been abandoned for centuries, if not millennia, but there was something about it that felt alive. A strange energy lingered in the air, thick with history and forgotten memories. The ruins didn't just speak of a civilization that had once thrived, they whispered of a power that had been lost, hidden away in the folds of time. As the Endurance touched down on the planet's surface, the crew felt a mix of awe and trepidation. They disembarked, stepping onto the alien soil for the first time. The air was warm and heavy, filled with the scent of rich vegetation, and something more, something that seemed to hum with the presence of something ancient. The jungle around them was alive with sound, the calls of distant creatures, and the rustle of unseen life filling the air. But the crew couldn't shake the feeling that the jungle itself was hiding something, watching them as they made their way toward the ruins. The city was vast, stretching for miles in every direction. At its center was a massive structure, a tower that rose above the others, its spire piercing the sky. The architecture was unlike anything the crew had ever seen. The stone was smooth and seamless, as though it had been crafted by some advanced technology rather than simple tools. Intricate carvings adorned the walls, symbols and images that seemed to tell a story, but one that none of them could understand. Dr. Vasquez led the way, her mind racing with the possibilities. If this was truly the home of humanity's ancient ancestors, what could they have been capable of? The technology required to build a city like this, let alone one that had stood the test of time, was beyond anything the crew had encountered. But it was more than just the technology that intrigued her. It was the idea that they might uncover answers to questions that had plagued humanity for centuries. What happened to these people? Why had they disappeared? And perhaps most important of all, were they the ones who had sent the signal? The crew began their exploration of the ruins, carefully cataloging everything they found. They uncovered strange, alien technology scattered throughout the city, mechanisms that seemed to be part of the city's infrastructure, yet entirely unlike anything humanity had ever developed. Devices that hummed with energy but operated by principles that defied understanding. But it was the discovery of a hidden chamber deep within the city's central tower that truly caught their attention. The chamber was sealed, its entrance hidden beneath a layer of overgrown vines and moss. But once it was opened, the crew found themselves standing before a massive vault, a vault that seemed to pulse with a strange, almost imperceptible energy. Inside, they discovered what they had been searching for. The vault contained ancient records, databanks, holographic images, and preserved artifacts, an entire library of knowledge from a civilization long dead. And at the center of it all was something far more shocking, a stasis pod, encased in protective glass. Inside, a body rested, perfectly preserved despite the centuries that had passed. It was human, its features unmistakably familiar, but this human was not from Earth. This was someone from a time far before humanity had reached the stars. The crew stood in stunned silence, the weight of the discovery crashing down on them. They had found the answers they sought, but the implications of what they had uncovered were far beyond their understanding. The lost world had not only been humanity's birthplace, it had been the cradle of a civilization that had once ruled the stars. And now, as they stood on the precipice of the past, the crew realized that they had just unlocked a door to a far darker history than they had ever imagined. The discovery of the stasis pod changed everything. What had once been an exploration for knowledge and answers quickly spiraled into a desperate fight for survival. The pod's lid, though sealed for centuries, had been mysteriously active when the crew approached. With a low hum, it opened, revealing the preserved human figure inside. But as the pod's contents were exposed to the air, something unexpected occurred, something that none of them were prepared for. The body inside the pod was no ordinary human. The figure was tall, with an almost unnatural symmetry to its features, a sense of perfection that didn't quite belong. The skin, pale and flawless, had an almost translucent quality, but it was the eyes, those eyes, that caught their attention. They were wide open, reflecting the lights of their surroundings, but they weren't empty. The figure, though lifeless for millennia, seemed to awaken as the pod's systems deactivated. Suddenly, the crew heard a loud whirring sound as the entire vault seemed to come to life. The chamber's lights flickered on, and an ancient hum filled the air. Dr. Vasquez, who had been kneeling beside the pod, stood up quickly, feeling a chill run down her spine. She had expected answers, but not like this. The pod had been designed to preserve the body, but it had also served as a containment unit, a prison for something far more dangerous than they could comprehend. Before they could react, the figure inside the pod began to stir. It wasn't the jerky, spasmodic motion of an unconscious body. It was controlled, deliberate. The human figure slowly sat up, the air around it crackling with energy. The crew backed away in alarm, their weapons drawn but trembling in their hands. They had no idea what they were facing. The figure rose to its full height, towering over the crew, its movements unnaturally smooth. The eyes, those strange, almost alien eyes, scanned the group. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, the figure spoke, its voice deep and resonant, echoing through the chamber. "Why have you awakened me?" it asked, the words seemingly incomprehensible yet somehow familiar. "You should not be here." A wave of panic swept over the crew. This was no ordinary human. This was something else entirely, a remnant of the ancient civilization that had created the Lost World, a species far more advanced than anything they had ever encountered, and yet, the being before them appeared human. The paradox was too much to process. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, cautiously, her mind racing. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into her chest. "Where did you come from?" The figure's gaze fixed on her, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of recognition. Then, it responded in a tone that sent a shiver down her spine. "We are the architects," it said, each word deliberate and filled with a weight that seemed to bear down on her. "We were the first to build the stars, the first to conquer the galaxies, and the first to fall." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. This being was clearly ancient, older than anything they had ever encountered. But what did it mean by the first to fall? The figure's gaze seemed to turn inward for a moment, as if lost in memories of a distant past. Then, it focused once more on the crew. "You have awakened us at a time when our enemies are once again stirring," it continued, its voice laced with a bitter edge. "You have triggered something you do not yet understand." The room fell silent. What had they done? What dangers had they unleashed by disturbing the remnants of this forgotten civilization? The figure reached out, its hand glowing with an eerie energy. As it spoke, the chamber's walls began to hum again, a low, vibrating sound that seemed to resonate deep within the crew's bones. "You have awoken the legacy of the architects," it said. "Now, you will learn the cost of that discovery." Before anyone could react, the chamber door slammed shut, locking them inside. The lights flickered once more, and the air grew colder, thicker. The awakening was no longer just a revelation, it was the beginning of something far more dangerous. The chamber's temperature dropped sharply as the walls hummed with a strange energy. The crew stood frozen, staring at the figure before them, unsure of what to do next. The being's words echoed in their minds, leaving an unsettling feeling in the pit of their stomachs. The architects, this was who they had awakened, and now they were trapped in a chamber with an entity that held knowledge and power far beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. The glowing hand of the architect hovered in the air, casting an eerie light on the crew. The energy emanating from it was palpable, like static electricity, making the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. Dr. Vasquez tried to remain calm, but her thoughts raced. What had they triggered by awakening this being? Why had the architects fallen? And most importantly, what enemies were they referring to? The architect's eyes flicked toward her, as if sensing her thoughts. "You seek answers, but the truth you seek is not one you are prepared to hear." The voice was a cold, distant whisper, like the remnants of a lost civilization that had once wielded unimaginable power. "The architects were the first to ascend. We mastered the stars, manipulated time, and altered the fabric of reality itself. But in our arrogance, we made enemies who would destroy everything we built, erase all traces of our existence." The crew exchanged nervous glances, the weight of the architect's words sinking in. The idea of a civilization that could manipulate time and reality seemed almost too vast to comprehend. They had always thought themselves to be the pinnacle of technological achievement, but now, standing before this being, they realized how little they truly knew. The fall of the architects was not an accident, the figure continued, its voice reverberating through the chamber. It was the result of our own creations, machines that became sentient, power that spiraled out of our control. We had grown too powerful, too reckless, and in doing so, we triggered a chain of events that led to our downfall. The very enemies we sought to control turned on us, annihilating us from the stars, burying our cities, and leaving nothing behind but fragments of our legacy. Dr. Vasquez's mind spun. And what about us? Why were we chosen to find you? Why now? The architect's gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment there was a hint of something, regret, perhaps, or sorrow. You were not chosen. You were guided. The signal was not a message to be answered, it was a warning that the enemies of the architects are returning. The same forces that obliterated us are rising again, and this time, they will not stop until they have erased every trace of our existence. And you, the architect's eyes fixed on the crew, dark and knowing, you have opened the door. Now, you will be the ones to face them. A silence fell over the group, the implications of the being's words settling like a weight in their chests. They had thought they were exploring the remnants of a lost civilization, but they had awakened something far more dangerous, a war, a conflict that spanned galaxies, one that had the potential to destroy everything humanity had built. Before Dr. Vasquez could respond, the figure moved again. With a fluid motion, it extended its hand toward a hidden panel on the wall, causing it to slide open with a hiss. Inside was a holographic display, showing star maps and symbols the crew didn't recognize, some of them even pulsating with a dark, ominous glow. These are the enemies of the architects, the figure said, its tone cold and unwavering. They are already on their way, and your world will be the first to fall. The room seemed to darken further, and a sense of impending doom settled over the crew. They had no idea how to stop what was coming, nor how to even begin to comprehend the true power of the forces they had unleashed. The truth was now undeniable. They had awakened something far older and more powerful than themselves, and it was clear they were no longer in control of their own fate. The words of the architect hung heavily in the air, each syllable a hammer striking the crew's hearts. The enemies of the architects were already on their way. A deep, primordial fear began to take root in their minds. The world they had once known was fading, replaced by an unimaginable threat that was both ancient and terrifying. The crew stared at the holographic star maps, their eyes widening as dark shapes appeared among the distant stars. The symbols pulsed with a malignant energy, like the beating of some monstrous heart, far beyond the edge of the galaxy. These were no ordinary enemies. They were beings of destruction, masters of cosmic forces, capable of erasing entire civilizations with a single blow. As the hologram flickered, a cold dread filled the room. The architect's voice cut through the silence, more urgent now. They are not just coming for me. They are coming for you, for your world, for everything you have ever known. Dr. Vasquez took a step forward, her mind racing. How do we stop them? What can we do to defend ourselves? Her voice was calm, but inside, her heart was pounding. There had to be something, anything, they could use, some weapon, some technology left behind by the architects. The knowledge stored in the city's vaults had to hold the key to their survival. The architect's eyes softened, but there was little comfort in them. You cannot stop them, not by your own means. The power of the architects has been diminished, our cities buried, our technologies lost. The enemies that seek your destruction are beyond your comprehension, but there is a way. The crew leaned in, hanging on every word. What was this way the architect spoke of? Would it give them a fighting chance, or was it simply another empty hope? There is a weapon, the architect continued, its voice almost a whisper, but it is not what you think. It is not a weapon of destruction. It is a weapon of control. The power to manipulate the very fabric of reality. It was the reason for our downfall. Our own hubris led us to create something we could not control, but it is your only hope. Dr. Vasquez's mind whirled. A weapon of control. To manipulate reality itself. Could such a thing even exist? And if it did, what would it do to the fabric of their universe? Would it tear it apart? The weapon is hidden, the architect said, as if reading her thoughts. It lies beneath the surface of this world. You must find it, but you will not be alone. The enemies are already searching for it. They have been for millennia. And they will stop at nothing to take it from you. Fear and urgency filled the room. The stakes were higher than ever. The crew was no longer just explorers. They were now soldiers in a war they didn't understand, fighting to protect their world from an unimaginable enemy. But the weapon they sought, the one that could give them a chance at survival, was a double-edged sword. It had caused the fall of the architects, and now it was their only hope. Would they be able to wield it without falling victim to the same fate? Time is running out, the architect warned. You must move quickly. The enemy has already begun their advance. The first of their ships will arrive within a matter of days. You will need every advantage you can find. Dr. Vasquez turned to the crew, her eyes filled with determination. They had no choice but to go after the weapon. They had to find it, before the enemies did. But deep down, a part of her knew that this was no longer just a mission of discovery. It was a race against time, a race to save everything they had ever known. As the crew prepared to leave the chamber, the architect spoke one final time, its voice grave. Be warned, the weapon is not meant for mortals. Its power will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Trust no one, not even yourselves. The crew turned and made their way out, the weight of the architect's warning pressing down on them. The countdown had begun. The enemy was coming, and the only hope they had of surviving was the ancient weapon buried beneath the surface of the world. The crew made their way back through the ancient city, the weight of the architect's warning heavy in their minds. They had no time to waste. The enemies were already on the move, and they had to find the weapon before the forces that had once destroyed the architects could claim it for themselves. Their path led them deeper into the heart of the ruined city, into the most ancient vaults where the architect had said the weapon was hidden. The air grew colder as they descended, and the sense of foreboding thickened around them. Dr. Vasquez led the way, her mind still reeling from the architect's revelations. The weapon, the power to manipulate reality, it was something beyond their understanding. Could it be real? Could such a force really exist? And if so, what would it cost them to wield it? The deeper they went into the vault, the more the walls seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, as if the very structure was alive. Symbols they couldn't decipher flickered along the stone, glowing faintly in the dim light of their torches. The air smelled of ancient dust, tinged with something metallic, like the scent of forgotten power. At the far end of the vault, they found what they were looking for, a massive door, unlike anything they had seen before. The stone was seamless, smooth, and black as obsidian, and it shimmered with an unnatural glow. This was the heart of the weapon's hiding place. Dr. Vasquez approached it cautiously, feeling a strange pull toward the door, as if something inside was calling to her. "We need to open it," she said, her voice steady but filled with awe. She turned to the crew, who stood in silent agreement. The door was unlike any mechanism they had encountered in their travels. The controls were built into the stone itself, intricate patterns of energy and light woven into its surface. With no visible key or panel, it seemed the door would never open by ordinary means. It was then that Dr. Vasquez realized the answer was right in front of her. The symbols, the carvings in the stone, were not just decorative. They were instructions. The knowledge she had gleaned from the ruins was not just a record of a lost civilization, it was a language, a key to unlocking the power hidden within the vault. The crew gathered around her as she began to trace the patterns, her fingers brushing over the glowing symbols. The stone hummed beneath her touch, responding to the activation of the ancient technology. The door shifted with a sound like the grinding of mountains, opening slowly as the darkness inside revealed a vast, cavernous room. At the center of the chamber, suspended in midair, was a pedestal holding a strange, otherworldly object. The weapon. It was unlike anything any of them had seen. It wasn't a traditional weapon, it wasn't a gun or a bomb, but something more abstract, more powerful. It was a sphere, pulsing with an inner light, constantly shifting in shape, as though it was made of fluid or energy. It seemed to bend reality around it, the air warping in its presence. The crew felt it, an undeniable presence, like the hum of 1,000 voices speaking in unison. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, drawn to it, her heart racing. She could feel its power, its vast potential, but also the danger it represented. This was the weapon that could reshape the fabric of the universe, and that thought alone made her hesitate. The rest of the crew stood back, waiting for her to make the next move. They trusted her, but even they couldn't fully comprehend the magnitude of what they were about to do. In that moment, they realized that no matter what choice they made, they were no longer just explorers. They were the custodians of a power that could either save or destroy everything they knew. Dr. Vasquez reached out, her fingers brushing against the smooth surface of the sphere. It was warm, pulsing with an energy that felt both alien and familiar, as if it was alive and aware of her presence. The moment her skin made contact with the surface, the world seemed to shift. Reality itself seemed to bend, twisting in on itself like a strange dream. Then, the voice of the architect echoed in her mind. You must choose wisely. The weapon will not yield to you without a price. The cost is not just your life, but the very fabric of existence itself. Dr. Vasquez's hand trembled. The revelation had come too late. She was already holding the fate of the universe in her hands, and as the chamber pulsed with an unnatural light, she realized that the true test had only just begun. Dr. Vasquez stood motionless, her fingers still pressed against the shifting surface of the sphere. The air around her seemed to crackle, every molecule vibrating with the raw power emanating from the weapon. It was as though the world itself had drawn a breath, holding it in anticipation of the decision she was about to make. The sphere pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, its energy both inviting and terrifying. Behind her, the crew watched in silence, uncertain of what to do. They had come to this moment with one goal in mind, to save humanity. But now, faced with the potential of the architect's weapon, they understood that the stakes were far higher than they had ever imagined. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a battle for the very essence of reality itself. Dr. Vasquez's mind raced. The architect's warning echoed in her thoughts. The weapon could reshape reality, could rewrite the laws of the universe, but at what cost? The balance of existence was delicate, and tampering with it could have consequences they couldn't yet comprehend. Still, the enemy was closing in. Their ships were already on the edge of the galaxy, and time was running out. If they didn't act, humanity would be annihilated. But even as she faced this truth, a question lingered: was humanity worthy of wielding such power? The architects had fallen because of their own hubris, their belief that they could control forces far beyond their understanding. Would humanity repeat that same mistake? Her fingers clenched around the surface of the sphere, and in that moment, the answer became clear. The weapon wasn't meant to be controlled, it was meant to be understood. It was a tool, not an instrument of domination, and the true power lay in its potential to create, not destroy. With a deep breath, Dr. Vasquez made her decision. She withdrew her hand from the sphere and turned toward the crew. "We can't use it to destroy," she said, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "But we can use it to rebuild. We can change the course of history, but we have to do it together. The architects fell because they believed they were alone in their power. We can't make that mistake. The crew nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The decision had been made, not to wield the weapon for war, but to use its unimaginable power to reshape humanity's future. They would use the weapon to heal the damage done to the world, to restore balance to the galaxy, and to create a future where humanity could thrive, not as conquerors, but as stewards of a new era. As they activated the sphere, a brilliant light filled the chamber, a light that was not blinding but illuminating, as though the very fabric of existence was being woven anew. The walls of the vault seemed to come alive, as if the building itself was awakening from a long slumber. Outside, the sky shimmered with the same energy, a sign that the universe was responding to their decision. The architects had been right. The weapon could manipulate reality, but it was not a force of destruction. It was a catalyst for change. And as the crew stood together, watching the transformation unfold, they realized they had done more than save their world. They had rewritten the future of humanity, not as rulers, but as caretakers of a reborn universe. As the light faded and the energy settled, the crew looked out at the world they had saved, a world now full of possibility. The enemy had been repelled, the threat averted, but the true journey was just beginning. They had not only rediscovered the roots of humanity, they had rekindled its spirit, and in doing so, had set the stage for a new chapter in the history of the stars.